Good evening, and welcome to the Columbia County Democratic Committee's Judicial Candidate Forum 2023. My name is Sam Hodge, and I am the chair of the Columbia County Democrats and your host this evening. Who serves on the bench is a paramount concern for our county. Justice is a bedrock principle in our democracy. As Democrats, we don't seek a justice that is blind, but rather one whose eyes are wide open to the shortcomings of our criminal justice system. A good judge, one who is fair and impartial, must also have empathy. Too often, members of our community are numbers on a court docket rather than people. The mother of three trapped in a cycle of domestic violence, the young adult, not yet 21, charged with a serious crime, the older couple mired in medical bills and facing eviction. These are our neighbors, friends, and family members. All of us deserve a judge that is understanding and laser focused on how to uphold the law, make people's lives better, and our community safer. A county court judge is authorized to handle the prosecution of all crimes committed in Columbia County and will, generally speaking, handle all felony cases. They will preside over family court matters, surrogates court, and other civil matters. Tonight's forum will showcase three candidates vying to serve as our next county court judge. They are attorneys Mark Porton, Mike Howard, and Brian Herman. There are two vacancies with three candidates running for the Democratic nominations. So in June, there will be a Democratic primary to determine who will be on the November ballot representing our party. A few notes. Tonight's event is being recorded, and we will share a link to the recording following the event. Closed captioning is available, so please click on the closed caption box at the bottom of your screen to enable. All participants are muted. Prior to tonight, attendees could submit questions via email, and questions can be submitted for the candidates via the chat box tonight, and you can send your questions to Submit Questions Here, which is being manned by Todd Wolforth, our communications chair. He will be combining and consolidating frequently asked questions, giving preference to the order in which the questions were received. Our hope is to cover as many topics as possible. We will be alternating between the candidates, between the questions crafted by the Candidates and Campaigns Committee, chaired by Lee Jamison, and those submitted before tonight, and questions submitted via the Zoom chat box. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature to contact Claire Ackerman, and we will do our best to help out. You can also email info@columbiacountydemocrats.org, which we will be checking throughout the night. I do ask for your indulgence for any technical glitches in advance, as we are navigating Zoom with quite a large group. I want to thank Lee, Todd, Claire, along with the other members of the Candidate and Campaigns Committee for helping make tonight possible. A few ground rules. Each candidate will be afforded 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Following their remarks, the question and answer portion will begin. I will ask the question, and then each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer, and we'll be alternating who answers first. So now it's time for the show. So we're going to begin with Mike Howard. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and I'm going to be unmuting you now.
I'm glad to see everybody here this evening. My name is Michael Howard, and I want to be your county court judge. I'm 57 years old. I've been married for 28 years, and I have 3 sons, aged 23, 20, and 18. I have a vision for county court. I want to expand substance abuse treatment court, start a mental health court, create a veterans court, and have a youth court that addresses these young people's needs. In 1855, Frederick Douglass said, "It is easier to build strong children than to fix broken men." There are individuals that need to be separated from society, and those people will be sent away. But many people can and will be rehabilitated if we choose to make the world a better place and use the tools and programs that the court system has to offer. Since 1996, I've personally defended 14,000 535 criminal cases for the Public Defender's Office in Columbia County. I've personally represented over 3,000 criminal clients in my private office, and I've personally handled over 700 civil cases. I've tried at least 35 jury cases to verdict. I've spent my career representing the underprivileged, the downtrodden, and provided them with hope and guidance. I was born and raised here in Columbia County. I went to Hudson High School, Davidson College, and then Brooklyn Law School, where I was selected to be on the Journal of International Law. I've had my own law office since 1992, and I've worked for the Public Defender since 1996. For the past 10 years, I've been the first assistant public defender, and I care about the people in our community. In 2012, I received the New York State Defenders Association Wilfred O'Connor Award. That award is given annually to the New York State Defense Attorney that exemplifies the client-centered sense of justice, persistence, and compassion that characterized Wilfred O'Connor's life. I have demonstrated a lifetime of getting the results that enable my clients to have a second or third chance and to thrive. Over the past 30 plus years, I've developed a reputation as one of the top lawyers in the region, and I'm well respected by my peers. I have and hold democratic values. Ask around, talk to your neighbors and friends, speak to people that work in the criminal justice system. If you do that, I'm confident that you will support me to be your next county judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we're going to hear from Brian Herman. And Brian, I am going to unmute you now.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening and to share with you why I'm asking for your support for my candidacy to be Columbia County Court Judge. First, please let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong progressive Democrat who grew up in a working class family. I'm fortunate to be married to my wife, Barbara. Together, we raised our daughter, Shannon, here in Columbia County, where she graduated from Taconic Hills and now is studying law at Brooklyn Law School, my alma mater. Now, let me tell you my story. I grew up in Richmond Hill, Queens, knowing what it's like to feel different from the other kids on the block. Our family was the only Jewish family in the neighborhood where I experienced anti-Semitism and was regularly subjected to harassment and even physical assaults. These experiences have inspired me to spend my professional career fighting hate and discrimination. I was the first member of my family to attend and graduate college. In college, I worked night shifts as a New York City taxi driver. Also in college, I was actively involved in the New York Public Research Interest Group, NYPIRG, where I became an advocate for many important causes. Within a month of starting law school, my father unexpectedly died at the age of 55. Thus, I had to run the family's hardware store 7 days a week while going to law school at night. As a young lawyer, I wanted to fight for social justice. For example, in the early days of the AIDS crisis, I supported the AIDS Center of Queens County. We eventually moved to Columbia County and we became full-time residents. For over 20 years, I practiced law on Warren Street and have been an active member of the Columbia County business community. I have provided pro bono services to many individuals as well as not-for-profits here in the county. These include Animal Kind, the Hudson Interfaith Council, the Columbia County Sanctuary Movement, and the Recovery Kitchen. In the early 2000s, I was elected Copiague Democratic Town Chair. In 2006, I was elected Copiague Town Judge as a Democrat and was re-elected in 2010. For the last 6 years, I was honored to serve as a Hudson City Court Judge. I have presided over many trials and hearings. As a judge, pursuing alternatives to incarceration is critically important to me. When appropriate, I've referred defendants to specialty courts such as drug treatment courts. My life has been about service. I believe that my legal knowledge and skills as an attorney and judge, my real-life experiences, compassion, strength, and integrity have prepared me to serve as your Columbia County Court Judge. I look forward to your questions and to learn from all of you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. I am now going to pass things off to Mark Porton. Mark, I am unmuting you now.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I can't thank you enough for your being here and taking the time for this very important issue and campaign and position. For over 15 years, I've been a judge in this county. I've also been a prosecutor, a public defender, while also having a successful private practice. Whether it is a parent fighting for custody, a mother protecting herself and children from domestic abuse, prosecutor prosecuting a violent offender, a victim in need of protection and the right to be heard, or someone charged with a serious crime, no one should come to court and sit before a county court judge who is learning on the job. I have seen what that looks like over the years, and it is not a pretty picture. I have prosecuted the most violent and dangerous. I have protected the most vulnerable: children, women, seniors, those with mental impairments and physical disabilities, the easy targets that we see every day. Since 2016, I have been proud to serve as a county conflict defender, where I have represented the poorest in this county in family and criminal court, those most in need of protection under the law and who are most susceptible to unequal treatment. I have for many years had a private law practice, mostly focused on criminal and family court matters in this county and many others. Since 2007, I've served as a judge in 3 different courts in this county. I was a judge in the village of Chatham. I was later appointed by a Democratic mayor to a 6-year term as city court judge in Hudson. And during that time, the Office of Court Administration also on occasion appointed me as an acting city court judge, both in Rensselaer City Court and Troy City Court. Currently, I preside in the town of Ghent, where I'm proud to say I was cross-endorsed in my last election. I have also been a hearing examiner for the New York State Department of Education, where I decided whether a teacher was morally fit to teach children in the New York State public schools. Altogether, I have the experience in all of the areas most important and most often heard in county court: criminal law and family court matters. Because of this experience, I can and will be a judge who levels the playing field, who finds the truth and holds all accountable. I will do this by ensuring that those who stand before me receive equal treatment and equal justice as our Constitution requires, and I will serve as I always have, with integrity, fairness, and without bias. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mark. The very first question we have today is going to go to Brian Herman. And the question is, what attributes in your experience make for a good judge?
It's a combination, of course, of, I guess, primarily legal knowledge and experience, compassion, and real life experiences. Being able to understand the position of the parties before you, where they're at, what has brought them there, and what is the best solution for their situation, taking into consideration the interests of the parties as well as our community as a whole and our state as a whole. It's really putting all your heart and soul into your cases. I mean, I've spent so many nights thinking about the cases I was going to have to face the following day and before me, or cases that I dealt with the day prior. It's a life enveloping pursuit, being a judge. It affects every aspect of your life, and it's a full commitment. And I believe I've demonstrated for 14 years, and I'm asking for this opportunity to continue to serve as a judge so I can fulfill my life work. And I think I have the proper requisites to do the proper job for our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. The same question goes to you, Mark. What attributes in your experience make for a good judge?
first of all, and as I was alluding to before, is that the real life experiences that I've had, both prosecuting, both defending, and also being a judge, all together provide me a platform to take further the core beliefs that I have and the core way of approaching the cases in court. Calling on my experience, having the empathy and the ability to listen carefully, to understand that the people in front of me are not numbers. They're not merely there for someone else's folly, but they are there for life-altering questions and life-altering situations having to do with some of the most serious and some of the most painstakingly intricate types of legal questions that come up and that people are affected by. People don't usually plan on ending up in court. They don't end up being in family court or having suddenly a relative who's been arrested. These are things that would come before me, that I have a history and a track record of understanding bias, understanding the impact on individuals who don't have the ability to hire lawyers or that don't have the ability to afford counsel or other investigators or benefits. And in doing so and treating everybody fairly and equally, that I believe is the only way that you can truly put together all of the players and the situations that arise in county court and handle them in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, same question goes to you, Mike, and I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. I believe the most important factors are independence, experience, expertise, dedication, compassion, and judicial temperament. Many years ago, there was a body of the New York State Bar Association. They would go around and talk to different lawyers and ask them questions. How is it to practice in front of certain lawyers? Would this judge be a good mentor? Would he teach us how to respond and behave? As a judge, you have an obligation to the litigants to treat them with compassion, empathy, fairness. You also have that same responsibility and obligation to your staff, the other lawyers, and the other judges in your courtroom. Too many times we hear stories where people are lacking in civility. They lack decency when they render decisions. They don't think about the implications. When someone gets sent to jail and they don't have a plan in place for where the kid's going to go, who's going to pay the child support, who's going to get the kids to school. These are all factors that the judge needs to take into consideration. He has to be willing to spend the time to figure out who the people are that are before him. I've always prided myself on knowing who these people are, figuring out their stories, talking to them, interviewing them, figuring out how they can best be served. I may not always have a perfect solution, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to listen to what they say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The next question goes to Mark Porton. And the question is, what injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom, and what was your response to those events? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. One typical case that comes to mind, I had a situation where I was not the first attorney assigned to a case as conflict defender, but I had a case, I was assigned to it at a later date. And at that point in time, my client had already been indicted and we were actually heading towards trial. And I took the opportunity not only to really assess all of the paperwork and all of the documentation with the case and speak to my client, but there was a nagging issue that I had. And at the point where the judge determined probable cause for the search of his vehicle and his arrest, it didn't seem right to me. There was one statement that was provided by a white woman who was somewhat respected in the community, and her statement was given a different treatment in the record. Her statement was presented as a sworn statement to the judge, and there were a number of issues related to that statement that were just portrayed in a way that served as the foundation for the court's probable cause determination. What I ended up doing was bringing to the court's attention a number of African-American witnesses whose statements were either that were actually sworn statements, but were not presented as such. They were presented in kind of a disjointed way. And ultimately, the court wasn't provided with not only a full picture, but a picture that was very much in line with my client's innocence and a lack of probable cause. Ultimately, and something that rarely happens, is that this judge, upon review, overruled his own probable cause determination, which was based upon the officers and the assistant DA presenting a picture to him, overruled his own probable cause determination, and ultimately the indictment was dismissed.
Thank you, Mark. So the next question goes to Mike Howard, and I'll read it again. What injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom, and what was your response to those events? And so I'm now going to unmute you.
Thank you, Sam. So I was the public defender assigned to Hudson City Court when the Hudson Police first got the grant to buy tasers. So when that first happened, and it was in the 2004-05 range, tasers started to be used with a high degree of frequency. And they were usually applied to people that had the least ability to resist. So once I started seeing them happen, I started looking at them and I said, my God, we can't use these machines this way. So I took two cases. I sued the Hudson Police Department. I sued individual officers in two separate cases where I thought they exceeded their rights and their authority to use them. I was able to depose those officers. I was able to get their handbooks and documents. I was able to figure out that it's all about money. It's all about funding. And it was a toy for the police to utilize. Because I sued the Hudson Police Department and individual officers twice, the number of taser use went down dramatically. And we rarely see tasers used in the city of Hudson now. I also have a case that's going on right now that's set for trial in May in the Court of Claims, and I'm suing the New York State Police for driving a car at a very high rate of speed and crashing into someone right outside of the Hawthorne Valley School. So if I see something wrong, I'm going to do something about it, and I do.
Thank you, Mike. Brian, same question to you. What injustices have you witnessed in or outside the courtroom, and what was your response to those events? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thanks, Sam. Well, let me talk about the courtroom because that's, I guess, the most pertinent place. The judge sets the tone in the courtroom. It's the judge's courtroom. A judge who is sensitive and compassionate and treats people with dignity, integrity, elevates the whole environment of the courtroom. On the other hand, judges who are short-tempered, arrogant, mean-spirited, works against pursuing justice in a courtroom. I've seen judges who've acted in inappropriate ways, which subjected people to injustice in the courtroom, and that is obviously antithetical to what it's all about. So I think the best way for me to answer this question would be to say that the experiences that for almost 40 years of practicing in courts in New York State, I've appeared in front of surely hundreds of judges over those years, and I've learned from the good and from the bad, and I think I know what it takes to run a courtroom that treats everybody with dignity, that elevates the professionals, that encourages attorneys to do the best work they can for their clients, and ultimately achieve justice. So the injustice that I've really observed emanated from the judge, and based on these observations and experiences, I've learned, I believe, how to be a fair and just judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We're now going to move on to our next question, and the person answering it first will be Mike Howard. Apologies. So Mike, first question to you. How specifically have you or will you ensure that beyond being a fair judge, your interpretation of the law does not contribute to a failed system of disproportionately jailed Black and Brown community members? And so I'm going to unmute you now.
Thank you, Sam. When you look at a case and you have a client that comes in, or you have someone appear before you as a judge, you have to take into consideration their life experiences. Where did they come from? Did they have the benefit of two parents? Did they have a good education? Did they have the chance to thrive and succeed? Did they have people in the community that cared about them? Were they involved in a mentoring program? And if they didn't have those things, they didn't have the benefits that a lot of our children's had, you need to alter what you think would be the best plan for them. The majority of young minority people that go to prison, a lot of them are for drugs. So right now, after the Rockefeller drug law reformed, judges have a fair amount of discretion, but we have to follow the law. And the law may not always be taking into consideration all of their concerns. So we have to take those into account. And the way it can be taken into account right now with the system that we had is to refer a lot of these people to a treatment court. Let them get the counseling. Let them try. Our studies indicate that the average person takes 7 times to stop smoking cigarettes. So if they're using heroin or fentanyl or something else, they need some understanding. They need some compassion. These are essentially, they're not victimless crimes because they victimize themselves, their family, and others. But there's got to be a better way, and there is a better way, and it's got to be utilized, and it's treatment court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Brian, question to you. How specifically have you or will you ensure that beyond being a fair judge, your interpretation of the law does not contribute to a failed system of disproportionately jailed Black and Brown community members? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you, Sam. Clearly, the law should be administered colorblind, ethic blind, racially, religious blind. The social ethnic position of a defendant is not a factor in determining guilt or innocence in a criminal matter. However, the judge does have the discretion on most matters as to sentencing. And that is where the humanistic aspect of an individual who is a judge comes to play. You take the totality of the defendant's situation, now presumably a convicted or admitted defendant, their background, their life experiences, the resources they've had, the opportunities they had, or the opportunities they were denied. And you try to administer justice in a manner which, as well as protect society, also hopefully gives the individual an opportunity to better their lives. It's not an easy thing. And just say, we do have treatment courts, and there's lots of talk of expanding it, but the fact of the matter is, in today's world, a judge has very limited resources and alternatives to help people beyond the criminal justice system. We do have probation, we do have parole. So there is opportunities for individuals to be given guidance and assistance as they reform from the criminal activities that they've apparently been found guilty of or have admitted to. So the way you address the disparity of incarceration is the way you address any disparity in a court. You make sure that the end result
All
of
right.
every case is not, does not take in consideration the person's race or ethnic origin, so forth.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. The next question goes to Mark Porton. So I'm going to unmute you now.
Can you repeat the question, just so I,
Yeah.
please?
How specifically have you or will you ensure that beyond being a fair judge, your interpretation of the law does not contribute to a failed system of disproportionately jailing Black and Brown community members?
One of the most central concepts to your question has to do with my my other life experiences and the ones that I referred to earlier. One of the things that I have and I've learned from and I've seen over and over again, and as an aside, the discovery changes in the law and bail reform are things that I think are absolutely wonderful, because what has happened is we've been provided with information that allows us to see early on and question certain things that for almost my whole career we couldn't see or we weren't aware of until the very right before trial or the very end of the preparation part of an individual case. I've had an opportunity, because I have prosecuted and extensively worked in that capacity, as well as on the defense side. I've had an opportunity to really understand and hold not only the people accountable and other attorneys and law enforcement, but have an opportunity to see early on whether or not there has been either some questions of bias, some questions of typecasting, and stopping people based on race or other issues. So finding those kind of issues early on. I've also had an opportunity to see judges who didn't do that. Who I had a client who was eligible for release after being almost acquitted on most of counts of an indictment, and then finding himself, I was able to secure an acquittal over on the last count, and it took the court a long time to get him out of state prison. And these are things that need to be reacted to quickly and understood early.
Thank you, Mark. The next question goes first to Brian. Brian, there is a big backlog in cases here in Columbia County and throughout the state of New York. How would you, if you were elected our next county court judge, improve court procedures and efficiencies and address that backlog? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you, Sam. Well, so the court system has two types of cases, criminal and civil cases. And each category of cases has the unique parameters that affects the backlog. Talking about civil cases. So unlike criminal cases, in civil cases, judges can encourage settlement, can provide alternative dispute resolution matters, such as court mediation. You could bring attorneys into chambers and try to encourage a settlement. I find that too many judges don't bother to do that in a civil matter. They just treat it as just, you know, do what they got to do and just push the case along. I believe a judge should try to help civil parties resolve issues to come to a resolution whenever possible. As far as criminal matters go, well, it's keeping both defense and prosecution's feet to the fire. There is timelines, there is deadlines. Discovery has to be provided by prosecution within a timeline, and you hold counsel to that. And you schedule trials as expediently as possible. You don't put your personal schedule ahead of the situation. Your obligation as a judge comes ahead of every other priority in your life. And when I was a city court judge and I had jury trials, nothing came before that. I made sure they would proceed as quickly as possible, and they have. So that's how I would address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. The question goes to Mark. Mark, how would you improve court procedures and efficiencies? And I'm now unmuting you.
Thank you. At its most basic level, I think a lot of it comes down to the desire and the ability to, I guess for no other way of saying it, to be a workaholic. The manner in which cases linger, especially now in family court and in criminal court, at the felony level and at the county level, I've never seen in all of my years of practice. There is I understand the effects of COVID and some other issues, but there remains to be a complete unwillingness to give litigants time in the early stages to really push for not only settlement, but in these cases that are very critical, to have either court staff, a clerk hear some of the cases just to be able to provide a backdrop out of the box, but the judges need to hold people to timelines. They need to hold, in the criminal cases, hold all of the parties accountable. And that what that means is when there is a basis for an indictment to be dismissed, an indictment needs to be dismissed. If an attorney is not representing an indigent client or a private client for that matter, in an expeditious and serious manner, there aren't presently safeguards to push for that and to ensure that the attorneys on all sides are acting in a manner to move cases and to resolve them. Trials aren't happening as often and as quickly as they should, and I don't think I think that there can be more done to hold people's feet to the fire and bring matters to conclusion.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, the question now goes to you, and I'm unmuting you.
Thank you very much. It's a very timely question because right now in Columbia County, the last I heard, we were 150 years so criminal trials that are waiting to be tried. The third department has sent down Judge Young from Rensselaer County. Last Wednesday, she did 15 minutes for each case. And then this Wednesday, yesterday, she came down personally and tried to broker a lot of possible resolutions in many cases. Judges have to be willing to put some pressure if they can. The way our criminal justice system works, though, the district attorney gets to drive the bus. They get to make an awful lot of decisions. Their position is they get to decide what's prosecuted, what's not. And judges historically have to honor that. And so what's been happening recently is there has been some headway and there has been some movement, and certain cases are being offered off the indictment, which hasn't been the case in our county as long as I've been here. So things appear to be getting somewhat better, but COVID was real. People didn't want to sit next to each other. People didn't want to experience having to be next to someone, and I understand it happened. In regard to civil cases, I was over in Greene County last week, and Judge Mott did an amazing job. He called up and had the defense attorney call the insurance adjuster, and then he asked for that person as boss, and he talked to them, and we ended up settling a case. So you can be active, you can try new things, you can work outside the box, but you've got to be willing to try. And you've got to be willing to make sure that people don't languish and sit in jail or sit there without their day in court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The next topic goes to Mark first. Mark, could county court judges in Columbia County have responsibilities for family, criminal, and surrogates courts? Could you describe your experience in each one of those areas? And I'm now going to unmute you.
Thank you. Both criminal and family are the two areas that have been most central to my past experience, to my experiences prosecuting, defending, etc. Those are the two that are most life impacting. Those are the two that the most important questions and important situations arise that affect people at their core and in their everyday life. Being faced with state prison time, with having had your children removed, and fighting to get them back. These are the kind of questions that come up and are really the most critical and the most important in the county court. And I've had extensive experiences with both. With respect to surrogates court, over the time of my career, I have had matters. I practiced in my private practice, wills and trusts and matters that do come up in surrogates court. Typically, my observations have been and experience has been that surrogates court, although important for its oversight, is the type of court that is often run as far as day-to-day issues and closely with the court, but by the clerk, usually the head clerk of the surrogates court. That has obviously it's a portion of the oversight and necessary focus of the court, but really the people issues and the life-threatening and life-impacting issues occur on the criminal and the family court side.
Thank you, Mark. Answering the question next is Mike. Mike, describe your experience in family, criminal, and surrogates court, and I'm unmuting you now. Or I'm trying to unmute you. Hold on. There you go. You're unmuted now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. In 1993, I worked for the Public Defender's Office exclusively in the family court. It wasn't a long period of time, but I did it. Now, I rarely work in family court. I do work in family court in juvenile delinquency proceedings, and I represent people, young kids that are either going to be placed or removed from their home. Surrogate court, I have a much larger footprint in. I've worked pretty extensively in surrogate court. I had a case where an elderly woman allegedly left a lot of her money to her financial advisor. I was able to hire Dr. Richard Holub, who is the Alzheimer's expert at Albany Medical Center, to go through the mini multi-test and establish that she lacked capacity of that at the time when she signed a will disposing a lot of money to her financial advisor. The criminal court, I have extensive background in. What I would do in family court, I believe, Greene County has a pilot program going on now. They try to get social workers involved in the very early stages of the family court. It relieves some of the pressure from the family court and the judges. Number two, it allows people to work with a buffer in between them where they're not saying disparaging things about each other, and then the next moment trying to work out visitation and custody. So I think you have to use psychologists, counselors, social workers, and I think you can really make a difference in family court and for juvenile offenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now I will take the question to Brian. Brian, I am unmuting you now.
Thank you. Okay, so all three courts, of course, are important courts if you happen to be involved in a proceeding in that court. So a criminal court, my experience is extensive. I've both been a defense counsel as well as a judge in the Hudson City Court and Copiague Town Court, where I've tried numerous jury trials as well as bench trials, hearings, the whole gamut. I have 13 published decisions as to criminal matters. That's been accepted by the official report of New York State and literally is in the law books. As far as surrogates court, throughout my professional career, I've always handled estates, trusts, and probate matters. I've handled many litigated, contested wills, and as well as more of the perfunctory proceedings that goes on in surrogate's court. As family court goes, again, early on in my career, I was very involved in the domestic relations matters when I practiced in Queens for the first 18 years of my career. In Hudson, I had an associate in my firm who specialized in doing family court matters, and I was intimately involved in all those matters that we did here. The reality is that all three courts impact lives, and all three courts need judges who care and who are intimately involved and do not necessarily delegate cases to third parties, but make sure the judge has his or her hand around the matter and shepherds the matter through the system and makes sure that the interests and justice of all parties is considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. We're now going to move on to our next question, which will go to Mike first. Mike, what do you believe is the primary consideration in granting and setting bail amounts for defendants? Describe the factors you would employ when making decisions on the amount of bail or whether to set bail. And I'm unmuting you now.
This is very near and dear to my heart. I would get into arguments with judges all the time. I would always start with, Judge, one of the bedrock principles is the presumption of innocence, Judge. You told us, as my client stands in front of you, that he is presumed innocent. So, Judge, if he's presumed innocent, why do you presume to set some king's ransom? Bail needs to be set for some individuals. Some individuals need to not have the opportunity to hit old ladies over the head, have sexual assaults and other horrific events and kill people. But the vast, vast, vast majority of the people that appear before us are from our community. They live down the street. They are able to reappear. So I'm always offended, and I've been offended when judges say, well, you know, your person did XYZ a few months ago. No, Judge, he might be charged with it. It might be an accusation, but he hasn't been found guilty. So the presumption of innocence, for judges to set bail on people initially, they have to do some sort of mental gymnastics that I'm not willing to do. There are certain crimes that the legislature has said, we've got to follow the law, and we can set bail on certain crimes, but it should not be utilized willy-nilly and for every time someone comes before you. And a person of little means, their bail should reflect that they have little means. And that's one of the primary things that to this day, I see judges do inappropriately.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Brian. Brian, what do you believe is the primary consideration in granting and setting bail amounts for defendants? And describe the factors you would employ when making a decision on whether to set bail. And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you, Sam. Well, this is an easy question because the law is very clear. New York, under New York law, there's only one reason to set bail, and one reason only, to secure the return of the defendant. Of course, that's if the judge is even empowered to set bail. As under the current criminal procedure law, as it was reformed in 2019, the number of offenses which a judge can initially set bail on at arraignment is very few, virtually no misdemeanors, and really, I guess what we can call, violent felonies. But just about every drug charge other than kingpin, you can't set bail, most misdemeanors, and many, many felonies. So first of all, the opportunity for judges to set bail has been limited, which is, of course, I think is a good thing. But when a judge is empowered by law to set bail, under New York law, there's just one basis to secure the return. So if you believe this defendant is going to return to court, then you should not set any bail. You should just release the person on his or her own recognizance. Now, let me say one last thing on this. As a judge, I've arraigned, I guess, thousands of people. Most of the time, they're ROR'd. Maybe I set bail, 5% of the time. I don't know what the statistic is. I never bothered keeping track. However, when I've set bail, I can probably count on my two hands the number of times a person hasn't shown up to court. meaning that the fact that I released them on their own recognizance proved to be the right thing to do. So, bail to me is an extreme remedy. So it should only be employed when necessary to ensure the return of the defendant to court. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So the topic is bail, and now we're going to go to Mark. I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. As Brian said, one of the things that has changed more fundamentally than many other changes in the law has been the bail reform. It is most welcome. It is absolutely time where local judges, which are the judges that primarily are the ones to set bail, are finally directed based upon not only the consideration about returning to court, but really directed based upon levels of crime, types of crime, types of situations that bail may or typically in most cases are not appropriate. There's been a almost generational way of looking at bail, especially that I've seen in Columbia County and most other counties in the area, where they would consult the district attorney's office, they would give recommend what bail should be, and judges would just, without really looking at the situation, looking at the litigants, would typically just go along with whatever the district attorney's office had recommended, or sometimes with what law enforcement would recommend. Unacceptable for many, many, many years. And this was the type of thing that, as Mike said too, is that we fought against every opportunity we had where a judge would go ahead and set bail on an individual, typically not a middle-aged white guy, but typically a minority, African-American, Black and brown population, and they would think nothing of putting them in jail awaiting other procedures. That doesn't happen anymore as much, and it's a good thing.
Thank you, Mark. All right, the next topic, we will begin with Brian. Brian, judges are often the drivers of innovation in our courtrooms. If elected, what opportunities for innovation have you identified, and how will you advocate or implement for them? I've just unmuted you, sorry. Well, I didn't unmute you. Now I'm going to.
Hey, thank
There
you,
you go.
Sam. Am I on? Okay, thank you. Well, of course, every court in the state is part of the unified court system. So it is not an independent entity that can do its own thing, independent of the whole state. However, judges do have a voice within the court system to ask and to encourage and to help develop pilot programs and innovations to the court. There is many resources available, and every year and every cycle, there's new resources that are tried. Some don't succeed, some exist, and a judge, if they want to take the initiative, can make use of these resources. And one thing I assure you, as a county court judge, I will bring every single resource that New York State has to offer to Columbia County to make sure that people are treated right, just, and respectfully, and that our community is best served by our court. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Same question to you, Mark. The question is about court innovation. And you're unmuted now.
Thank you. The most significant innovation, I think, as a general concept, are the alternatives to incarceration. I'm aware of and support efforts, both private and through the court system, that are opening up and using alternatives to incarceration for a number of different levels of crimes. If we're talking on the criminal court side, that is the failure of incarceration as a response is legendary. We've seen it with you know, and especially the hardest hit communities are those of the minority communities as well as other communities that have been systemically subject to drug prosecutions, to prosecutions having to do with not prosecutions, but in family court having to do with raising their children and issues that arise that are without any kind of context and any place to go for help. On the family court side, there has been an increase, and I would do everything possible with respect to auxiliary people, social workers, psychologists, but also on both sides having to do with resources that deal with economics, that deal with parties who are disenfranchised from their homes, from their children's, and ultimately from their jobs. And finding a balance and ways to deal with that would be a top priority.
Thank you, Mark. Now the question goes to Mike, and I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. I've identified that I would expand treatment court for substance abuse users. I would expand youth court. I would start a youth court in Columbia County. I would expand and start a mental health court on the county court level, and I would start a veterans court. So years ago, when I was up in Albany court and Judge Herrick was the judge, and I was trying to get a young person from Hudson into the treatment court up in Albany County because that's where he got arrested. And Judge Herrick had the temerity to tell the district attorney, why won't you let this person in your treatment court? Look around. Does this person not look like the rest of the defendants? I was representing a young African-American person from Hudson who Judge Herrick was eventually able to convince the DA's office to allow him to go into treatment court. For people to pretend like there's not institutional biases is not right. I want to commend Judge Roberts, our new Hudson City Court judge. She was a judge for, I'd say 8 minutes before she started a mental health treatment court there. So when she came in, she looked around, she saw there was a problem, she identified it, and she did something about it. So a lot of things can be done, but it can't be just lip service. You can't say, I'm going to do something or I want to do something. It has to be done. And if you had the chance to do it and you had the opportunity to do it and you didn't do it then, what makes us think you're going to do it now?
Thank you, Mike. So now we're going to move on to our next question, and we'll begin with Mark. So I know all three of you have spent decades as an attorney and probably have all sorts of stories you could tell. But this is a little bit more narrow. With your 2 minutes, please tell us about your greatest accomplishment as a lawyer and how it affected you. And I'll begin with Mark.
I would think my greatest accomplishment as a lawyer is yet to come. I have, up to this point, dedicated my career and dedicated my life to basically working 7 days a week to deal with whatever job I had at the time, but that dealt with the people that are involved and most susceptible to injustice. Whether I was a prosecutor, I always, had a very innate sense that the only thing a prosecutor really is sworn to do is to do justice. I can't think of a time when I did not do justice as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, or as a defense counsel for indigent populations. I have fought for not only equalizing the playing field, but also righting a number of wrongs that I had an opportunity to use from my experience and to understand the inner workings of the various interests in the court and protect those interests and have successful results for both criminal and family court litigants and people that I represented, both in my private practice, but also as a conflict defender. what is coming, hopefully as a county court judge, is the culmination of all of those, not only interests, but experiences. And I believe that because of what I've seen, what I know, and how to deal with these competing interests and the different players, that that will be what my greatest impact as a practicing lawyer and as a judge would be.
Thank you, Mark. So Mike, same question to you. What would you describe as your greatest legal accomplishment so far in your career? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. I have the article here. It's a case that is very near and dear to my heart. I represented a 58-year-old man from Hudson who was a substance abuser. And this was prior to the Rockefeller drug law changes. So he was looking at 12.5 to 25 times 3, which translates to a lifetime in prison. He had diabetes. He was set up by another drug user, and basically that person was trying to trade their freedom for my client's freedom. The state police had helicopters, they had big charts, they had glossy photos, they had microphone adapters, and they had video recordings of my client making transactions. Every single one of these transactions, he had to go out and buy the substance, come back, and then sell it to the undercover. And the police watched and observed that. So it got toward the end of the trial, and I quoted the Grateful Dead. He's been set up like a bowling pin. The only question here is whether you're going to knock him down. And then I started to cry, and the judge yelled at me and admonished me for showing emotion. But the jury saw that, and the jury acquitted that man. And he was found not guilty of 3 sales. He was found not guilty of the possessions, and then he had the opportunity to get his life in order. And it was a case where he was looking at the rest of his life in jail, and I got him out, and then he got into drug treatment. And I believe that's my best case to date.
Thank you, Mike. Same question to you, Brian, your biggest legal accomplishment, and I'm unmuting you now.
Well, I could talk about the big cases I did. I made the newspapers, I was on TV, that kind of stuff. But what really counts to me is helping individuals. I walk down the street, Warren Street. I work here. I come to work 6 or 7 days a week. I'm always running up and down the street doing something. People walk up to me, they thank me for what I've done, whether it be a judge or as a lawyer, the pro bono work, the way I treated defendants in court. I have people, that's the greatest thing I've done. I believe I've helped lives, individual lives, regular people, working class people like myself, people without privilege. And to me, all the fame, all the big legal fees and all the rest pales in comparison to when someone sincerely thanks you for helping them in a big way and to impact their lives in a positive way. So it's not one big case or 2 big cases. It's the hundreds and hundreds of cases that I've dealt with that really makes me proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. The next topic will begin with Mike. Mike, the question is, while serving on the bench, do you believe you have a role in bringing important legal or judicial issues before the public or the legislature? Why or why not? And what should your role be? And I'm unmuting you now.
It's a tricky question, and it's fraught with all kinds of possibility. I'll do my best to answer it. I recently read about a Queens Court judge who, in one of his decisions, he wrote, if I was able to sentence this individual to a youthful offender status, I would. So when I read, I thought to myself, why would he say that? Because the law restricts what he can do. And the law restricts who can get youthful offender status, because the day you turn 19, it's it. But what happened because of that judge's decision and how he worded it? Now there are committees and people in the state legislature that are looking at it and saying, oh gosh, this is a very thoughtful, intelligent judge who cares about people. And why would he say that? So you can send the message in certain ways, but you've got to be creative. We're not the legislature. We can't change it. We can't say that, oh, you're guilty of this offense. I'm not going to send you to jail if that's the minimum. However, you can make your concerns known. You can also write certain articles. You can communicate with other people, but a judge has to be careful because a judge has to be independent. He's got to apply the law fairly. However, where there's a will, there's a way, and you can make your voice heard, and you can make people know that you think an injustice was done here, but you were following the law. And there's got to be a way that people can change that. That's how bail reform changed, and that's how Rockefeller drug law changed, because of those exact examples.
Thank you, Mike. Brian, you're up next, and I'm going to read the question again. While serving on the bench, do you believe you have a role in bringing important legal or judicial issues before the public or the legislature? Why or why not, and what should your role be? And I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, well, there's two main factors here to consider. First of all, separation of powers, right? I mean, the judiciary and the legislature have to be separate. The legislature makes the laws, the judiciary applies the laws to cases, and hopefully produces justice. So it's a sticky wicket for a judge to get involved in legislative lobbying, let's call it, or try to influence that other branch of government without violating the Constitution. That being said, the one place where a judge can express their voice is in decisions, in written decisions, going through the trouble, the work of analyzing and expressing the reasoning and why they've come to a conclusion, and you can have additional comments in those decisions. So that is why I have 13 published decisions and many others I've written which were not published, because I took the trouble of expressing where I can things that I felt were wrong, things that were matters which were not being handled properly by counsel, and I was able to express it. So that is how a judge can do it, by taking the trouble of being a good writer and writing decisions. Additionally, there are opportunities where a judge may be able to testify in front of certain committees, whether of the Office of Court Administration or possibly the legislature, but those are special opportunities, not a day-to-day thing. It's really how you dispense justice, and going through the trouble of writing and possibly publishing decisions is where a judge can properly speak their mind and hopefully influence the public and the legislature. Thank
you, Brian. Now the question goes to Mark. Mark, I'm unmuting you now.
It's my understanding and my opinion that judges are precluded from doing things such as being involved in social issues, in social activism, in protests, in things like that. Where we can make a difference is when you have a full understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. For example, in criminal court and in family court, motion practice that comes before the court, the ability to not only utilize the legal knowledge and legal precedent, which we're required to do, but by being sensitive to certain aspects of a case, on one hand, bias, and those types of related issues, as well as procedure, and how things are actually, for example, in criminal cases, knowing what a proper presentation to a grand jury is, what makes something sufficient in terms of the evidence that's put before a grand jury. Those are things that a lot of judges don't have the ability to assess, and therefore can't begin to develop a body of work that provides for the public understanding and knowing where a judge may rest or may focus on a certain case, or certain types of cases. When there are repeated, either abuses by law enforcement or situations where there's a lack of sufficiency going forward, these are things that a judge can react to, a judge can make decisions on, and as far as activism in the form of what's right and just, they can do, and we can do. But in terms of being a voice outside of that to the public in a public forum, I don't believe we're allowed to do that. I think it's a very strict ethical rule.
Thank you, Mark. All right, we're approaching the last question of tonight's event. And it's we're going to begin with Brian. Brian, mental health matters often come before county court judges. What experience do you have in this important area? And I would just add, since this is your last opportunity to address the committee, you can also let us know why we should vote for you. And I'm unmuting you now.
Thanks, Sam. Well, mental health issues, of course, permeates our society in many, many ways. And unfortunately, many criminal matters are impacted by mental health issues. Many drug matters are self-medicating. People with mental or emotional health issues that are self-medicating. Family disputes. Sometimes there is quite often there is mental or emotional health issues. So it is something that is almost an element of virtually every criminal and family court matter to some degree. And of course, the stress and the experience of going through the judicial system can have a mental impact on people too. So you always take this into consideration. You call on all the resources that you have available, whether it be county resources, state resources, or private, not-for-profit organizations. You do whatever you can to make sure that the mental health issue that is the component of the matter before you is addressed to the best of your ability based on the resources provided. Now, as far as why to vote for me, well, I'm just a man of the community. I'm a regular guy, now with privilege. I live in the community. People see me every day. I'm in tune to the ethos of our community, I believe. I care about my neighbors. I care about you. I care about everybody who I impact. And that's my life. That's all I have in my life, really, when it comes down to it, is caring for people. And I'm so privileged to be a county court judge in this county. It'll be the pinnacle of my professional career. And I promise you from the bottom of my heart that I will give all I have, my heart, my soul, my energy into this job, and I will make you proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, we have Mark. So I'm going to unmute you now.
Thank you. I have witnessed a number of times deficiencies with regard to mental health questions that exist in some of the alternatives that exist now. Drug courts, for example, when they're run correctly, they do wondrous things. However, the system has really left out of the mainstream so many with mental health issues, and the issues are difficult. The issues are very, very hard to sometimes combine with the existing types of courts like a drug court, because the specifics and the characteristics of many mentally ill offenders are contra-intuitive with some of the drug court treatments. From my perspective, they need to be combined. They need to be addressed together because they go together. There is very rarely a situation where there has been either a substance issue that is not related to a mental health issue. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the mental health issue is not addressed. And so it becomes a revolving door, both in the drug court and in other auxiliary courts or programs because the mental health issues are not being, people are not being diagnosed. They're not being encouraged to take their medications. And it's a problem, but it's one in which I've had 2 or 3 cases right off the top of my head where by getting people to agree to have certain diagnosis made, permitted them to stay out of prison because it was found that they were mentally ill or that they had substantial impairment. I would like to be, and I believe I am a candidate for county court that combines a life's work on all sides. This is not an opportunity where I have not been involved in one area or another area. I've combined all of them, which are the focus of the county court, and can step in and start.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Last, we'll go to you, Mike. And I am unmuting you now.
Thank you very much. I don't know how many people know, but we have a mental health court in the city of Hudson right now that Judge Roberts started a few months ago. I am the public defender that's assigned to that court, and I work in the mental health court, and I work very hard in that court. I have my certificate here. It's from 2002. I was certified in the Adult Drug Court Planning Initiative in 2002, and I was part of the first drug court team that we had in Columbia County, and it was one of the first in New York State. And I went through extensive training, and in Hudson City Court, we had a drug court for around 10 years. Mental health court matters because people have substance abuse problems and they have mental health problems. They're unable to see treatment providers in an appropriate period of time, and we're trying to change that now. And in Hudson City Court today, we gave someone a sheet that said, you are moved up on the list. You get to go down to mental health now and you get to see a counselor. Why should you vote for me for county court judge? Why should you support me? My entire life and being has been about public service. My father was superintendent of schools in Hudson. My brother is the superintendent of schools. My mother was a teacher in Germantown. I was president twice of the Hudson Rotary Club. Been on the board of directors of the United Way, the Salvation Army. You see me ring the bell. You see me help out Operation Unite. I am committed to this community, and I will do this job to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Between the 3 candidates tonight, we have decades of diverse experience. So I want to thank each one of you for stepping forward to seek this vital and important office. And to all of you tonight who took the time to watch this forum, thank you. Get involved, sign up for our emails. You can go to www.columbiacountydemocrats.org. And if you want to throw a donation our way, by all means, do it. Thank you all for coming tonight. And that concludes our forum.